Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, as ever, Adam Bradshaw, and we are here today with a very special guest. It's been a long time since we've done one of these videos with a special guest over Zoom, but welcome Andres Faustinelli from Bearface.
Thank you very much, Adam, for inviting me. So this is going to be fun for sure. I think I've been always trying to push back on snobism in whiskey and trying to actually have fun with whiskey. And probably this expression is probably a very interesting one to play with and to talk about. So
absolutely. So I was just looking up the archives to make sure what I was about to say is true, and it is. We've tasted all of the Bareface expressions in our club so far. And they've all done really well, especially considering we're very much a Scotch-centric club here in Victoria, as you probably know. And they've all scored in the sort of mid-80s to high 80s range, which for whiskies of this price range and in this style in a Scotch-centric place is really quite impressive. And I came to find Bearface. I tasted it a couple of times when it was first coming out, but I really started hearing lots of other people talking about it. I think it was the 2019 Victoria Whiskey Festival, where at the Canadian Whiskey Awards, you picked up the best newcomer and also a gold for your regular edition.
And
exactly. It's just been, the ball's just been rolling ever since then, hasn't it?
Yeah, we started. That was my first ever show with a whiskey with my name on the bottle. So it was really very important moment for me. It was finally, this is amazing. So
nice.
And behind the scene, I've been behind some other brands, but this was really the first. This is my baby, from creation, design, from really putting together the process itself. So super happy with it. And then the following year, we got again best new whiskey with 111. There was a crazy mezcal whiskey blend. So that was another big moment for me, especially blending mezcal and whiskey and doing something really, really pushing a little bit too much, I like. So,
and I think you hit a key word for there that I've always considered to be an important part of the Bareface brand, and that's design. And I don't necessarily mean the amazingly designed bottles, which they are, by the way. The whole whiskey experience feels very much designed and curated in a sense. And I feel, as a bit of a designer myself, I actually studied graphic design, and that's sort of my background before I started working again in whiskey. I just kind of took a break in the middle there. One of the big things that I believe in design is understanding the rules to be able to break them. And that feels very much like what Bareface is doing, understanding all of the rules and regulations that it has to be for a Canadian whiskey, and then looking at those and go, how can we manipulate that into something? What can we do
That
with
is
this?
Exactly the reason why the scratches in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Is breaking and entering the whiskey untouched, halo category, right? So the scratches is really that, philosophically speaking, was how I can break into these very prudent, people don't want to take a lot of risk with whiskey, and how I can jump in and do something that is always a little bit pushing forward a little bit the whole discussion about what should be whiskey, right? So
we do have some very interesting rules here in Canada. The aforementioned 111th rule, of course, with the Oaxaca edition. Of course. It's a very, very interesting one. I've been trying to guess for a long time. You've left me waiting because I've been waiting for number 2 in that series. I've been trying to guess what the next one is. I'm wondering now, after seeing the selection behind you, if you're going to add some Kalila into a Canadian whiskey. Does that be?
No, it's for me, it's always a complete rethinking from scratch every release. If you ask me right now, I don't have a very clear direction. I still have 18 months, so it's not that I need an answer right now. I have a lot of experimental casks they don't have a home yet.
Yeah.
They're not part of my elementally aged Bareface. They're not part of the Wilderness 2, but we're doing experimentation. So the next release, I don't know yet, but probably is going to be linked to terroir. For me, these releases are an expression of place and ideally time, in which I can tell you when the inspiration happened, in what specific moment, and when actually we did the blend, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the task that I put myself was, let me do this one-time blend, very complicated, that involve a lot of involvement from people from outside whiskey. Matsutake was involving foragers of Matsutake that grows incredibly well in BC, in the Kootenays. This time is more a discovery that I made in Vancouver Island. So that's kind of, and usually you get, I always say innovation is about asking the wrong people the right questions. So you cannot bring innovation by just speaking to the experts. So let's speak to people that are from outside. Give someone from outside the problem, and maybe there is an interesting solution coming to play. So
absolutely. Nice. Yeah. Well, so one thing you mentioned at the beginning of the video as well is trying to get rid of the snobbery surrounding whiskey, which I thoroughly approve of. And that's one of the things that our whiskey club was founded on, the idea that whiskey is for everyone, right? And the whole idea that you don't have to spend a lot of money for a great whiskey or a lot of time. You don't have to be chasing down unicorns all your life. You know, there are some fantastic whiskeys out there that you kind of do have to do that for, but if you tried to drink every whiskey that was available, you wouldn't be anymore, frankly. And there are some incredible regularly available whiskeys. And that's one thing that I've loved about Bareface is since it's been available, it's pretty much always been available. Like a lot of these sort of like high concept whiskeys that come out that you see that's and like from a Scottish background, I would refer to them as like independently bottled whiskies, right? And a lot of those things, because kind of they come out and there's a bit of a hoopla and then they kind of just disappear. But you guys have really made sure that your standard edition has always been there, and then you've propped it up with these really unique and interesting limited editions. And
even the edition, the everyday elementally aged Bareface has been evolving. Like if you taste batch 1 and batch 11, where we are right now, there is an evolution. So it's not like a recipe blend at all.
Nice.
It's getting more and more complicated and more fun to blend, because more volume means you need to figure it out, like containers, where are they? What I deal with, like the season, the heat. If the summer is too hot, I might need to use the winter container to blend in. So there is a massive work. And philosophically speaking, is all designed in a very different way. Like whiskey industry is looking predictability, and I'm not looking for predictability out of a cask because I'm exposed. So when I'm exposed to the elements, every batch is a new problem to be solved and new exercise. So that's why there is an evolution between batches. So in the future, at some point, we're going to start putting the batches so people can like, oh, I remember that batch. Now I can compare with this one. And that is going to keep enhancing the discussion around what we're doing that is a little bit different. So
nice. And I look forward, I'm sure that when you start doing that, that'll be an interesting talking point at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. Everyone discussing which batch they're on this year. Did they like the last one more or less? Or Nice. Well, this new whiskey from the Wilderness series has a very special place in our hearts here on Vancouver Island, because as you mentioned, it was very much inspired by and contains a little bit of Vancouver Island in a sense.
100%. Yeah.
So I think it's about time I cracked open this bottle.
Let's do it.
I've had a tiny sample from the local rep recently, and I absolutely loved it. And it's about time I explored it a bit more. And actually, I should mention, if you want to come and explore this whiskey, at the time that this video is being uploaded to YouTube, if you're living here in Victoria, and especially if you're a member of the Dram Association, you can come into our store and try it for free right now. Just come in, ask for a dram, and it will be yours. And if you're not a member of the Dram Association, it's free to join. As I said, whiskey is for everyone, and we encourage anyone who has even a passing interest in whiskey to come and explore that interest here at the Strath. Oh, that's cool.
I went to visit Tofino, and I was surfing at the end of the day, and I took a little sample. Like, I will show you. these little bottles that I walk around. Usually take high proof whiskey. This time I fill it with Bearface and I put it in the wetsuit on the back. So when was an easy day, not a heavy day, and I was like, I'm not very good surfer, and I was like just chilling there, like in my table, and then I started sipping, and that sensation of the water from the sea, you have the mouth full of seawater with the whiskey, with the sweetness. That's what I nailed, what I wanted to do realistically for this release. I wanted just you have the sensation you have been swimming in the sea and you're coming out and sipping some whiskey. So by the beach, pretty much.
Nice. So talk us through the process of how that sort of salty aroma and taste gets in there.
So there are 3 parts in this blend. The first part, the most important part, is the one that is not common in whiskey. So we start with the most strange part, and then I will bridge back to a more common part. So it's 3 parts blend. The crazy component of this whiskey is the water that I use to proof down the whiskey from cask proof to bottle proof. This water comes from the separation of smoking sea salt with maple wood in an incredible place that is close to Campbell River, and is called Vancouver Sea Salt Company, Vancouver Island Sea Salt Company. They're just in front of Mitlenatch. There is a rain shadow island that is incredible. There is no rain. There is 1/5 of the rain of the rest of Vancouver. So it's quite a unique place. And they extract the salt and they make amazing sea salt. And when I went visit them, my initial idea was to cover the cask with sea salt. And then I see a black cabin in which they're smoking, and I see a hose coming out of the cabin. And I'm like, what is that? And they are like, yeah, that's the evaporation, there is humidity in the sea salt. It's not totally dry. We end up drying it and we collect the water and we throw away the water. I'm like, can I try the water? And I tried the water, and it had this incredible briny, subtle smoke taste that was absolutely amazing and really tasted to me really like the sea without the salt. So this is not a salty whiskey. There is no sea salt in this whiskey. It's just the water from the sea without the salt, and done through a distillation process. Very rough distillation, right? It's in a cabin, and we improve the system to collect a little bit more humidity, more condensation. Takes 3 months to have enough water to proof down this batch.
Oh, wow.
3 months waiting, because it's drop by drop. So it's actually more expensive than the whiskey in the bottle, like just that water, because the amount of salt you need to process in this way.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So that's the component that is for me key and to the core of this. The second component that is very important was I needed a lot of this smoke sitting already in the water, needed to combine with something that was in some ways a little bit smoky or caramelized, like a burned, slightly burned. So I had experimental cask, ex-Burgundy cask that we char over. So most of the whiskey industry, they de-char and re-char. We had toast cask from the wineries in the Okanagan, and I had Pinot Noir cask, and I had a cooper coming out of retirement to do this project for me and helping me. And I say to Carl, is his name, and I say, Carl, can you please, instead of shaving and then toasting, can you just char the wine with the oak, make them a single part of it, and let's fill it with whiskey. And we fill it with more than 13 years old whiskey. There was elementally aged for 2 years, was very special batch that I never used it. And this whiskey would taste after 6 months like cognac. I was fascinated, was changing from brandy almost to brandy, from whiskey, because of this connection, burning the 7 millimeters of wine that is inside the staves with the oak and then putting high proof spirit created this incredible, like sweet, like the caramelized fruit in your like crumble, the one that is attached to the Pyrex would like taste.
Yeah.
So this caramelized component and very fruit forward would connect with this water perfectly. And then the last component, I wanted an entrance that was honey and spicy. So I needed some spice, and I had this like Chardonnay cask that I was aging already and finishing in shipping containers. So it's white wine. If you put side by side, this release is a little bit more like less ruby red because it's mainly this Cascar Chardonnay, and that was the last component. So you start with the craziest component to match the water, and then you start like bridging to a more traditional, even if it's not traditional, because Chardonnay finished whiskey, there are not a lot, but I would say this is kind of tastes like honey, burnt butter taste. So it has some honey and spice at the same time, like oak spice together with honey. Yeah. So when you taste, it's probably the reverse. You start tasting the honey spice, the mid palate is the caramelized fruit, and then you finish with this touch of sea spray. It's like a campfire by the sea, you know, by when you're in the beach. That's kind of like the sensation.
Yeah, it smells incredible. So one of the things that I've always found with Bareface is I love that you're taking like a similar approach to very traditional Canadian whiskey, but in a very different way. Like whereas traditional Canadian whiskey, you have all of the different grains that are being aged individually and then blended together to make up sort of a end piece. I assume it's mostly going to be the same grain, but then taking very different casks and doing that same blending technique, which is, you know, a quintessential part of the Canadian whiskey experience, but getting the flavors from different places. And I find that absolutely riveting.
Yeah, it's a footprint. When you taste this, is a footprint of Mitlenatch, like that place, and the inspiration behind that. And really, in the smell, you can get like the sea. You really can smell like the brininess, like the sea spray.
And it's an interesting aroma from a Scotch background, because it's the kind of aroma that you often get with a really heavily peaty whiskey, but the smoke is like very, very minimal in comparison. You know, we're not talking very 55 minimal. Phenols here. It's more for anyone with a Scotch background who's watching and trying to equate that kind of aroma. It's very Old Pulteney-esque. It's got that sort of coastal flavor, but without the smoke.
Exactly.
Or the in-your-face smoke. Yeah.
And it's very, like the smoke is subtle, right? Like it's very subtle. And you get this salinity sensation regardless. Actually, when you drink it, you have like some extra salivation in your mouth because of like the salinity behind. Like it looks like there is some briny notes still attached to this water. Yeah. That they create this interesting cycle in your mouth.
And it's an interesting thing because it's not just salt water. It's specifically coastal. It's specifically much more of that. It's almost like driftwood or something, or like the pebbles on the beach that have had the salt water sort of splashing over it for days. And it's exactly much more than just salt.
Yeah, and we did test the water. There's no salt in it. Like really, there are like some components that are really interesting, and magnesium and all of that, because we also do a Venturi system, and we have some water waiting for this like heat to come and heat colder water, and the colder water comes from a well, so you get a lot of like the minerals from under like the plant by the water, so you get that's why you taste that.
And that's one of the interesting things about that coastal taste that you get in Scotch whiskies, especially the ones that are aged by the ocean there, is that the salt isn't really there. And what you taste when you're tasting sea salt is not really salt. The salt is like carrying and amplifying the other items. And if you think about like casks that have been matured on the seashore, like Bowmore, for example, that's right there up against the sea walls in the number one vaults, the salts can't actually penetrate the wood. There's no actual salt in that cask. but the things that are carried through alongside that salt that you recognize.
So it's a very different interpretation of a coastal, you're absolutely right, like whiskey style without the amount of peat or without the actual conditions or the actual process. It's completely different process itself. It's not super scalable. I cannot like do of this 30,000 cases or 10,000. This is a very small production.
Yeah.
And can be done because it's small by definition. So that's
with these special series like the 111 series and the Elemental series, do you ever intend to go back and try again with any of them? Will you make another Matsutake or another Oaxaca, or are you just moving on to the next one?
Only for new markets. We're expanding internationally, so I might. We already did a new Matsutake batch a year after. For the US market, but only 200 cases, very minimal, even more minimal than Canada. So Canada is usually ahead, it's going to be ahead like 3 years or 4 before the international. But if you miss it like Matsutake, maybe you can buy it in US. Because if you want to collect all the numbers, the only way to do it, since it's not going to come back to Canada, is to try to buy it in another country. So that might be a possibility. Right now, on number 2, Wilderness, we intend to stay in Canada and see what is the feedback and how it goes, and then really focus on number 3 now. So that is a completely different iteration. So.
And I absolutely adore this this second one in the Wilderness series. For anyone who is hearing for the first time about this Matsutake mushroom one and is thinking, how on earth do I try that? If you're here in Victoria, it is available at the Fathom Whiskey Bar at the Hotel Grand Pacific, where the Whiskey Festival actually happens. I've been helping them with their whiskey selection, and it's actually being featured in one of their cocktails right now as well. So I think they bought like two or three cases before it disappeared. So it should be available still if you're watching this video over at Fathom. Or, if you talk nicely to me, I've got a bottle at home. Nice.
And and he's always these releases are connected to a trip, a discovery, and usually getting involved with new people, like get a sense of inspiration from a place. And it's going to continue like that. It's going to be, I wanted to call them once because they're done once. It's a blend you want to do once. And it's not meant for big volumes and big scale. The whiskey selection we have behind the scene in Bareface is growing exponentially. We're sitting on 15,000 casks of whiskey right now. So,
nice. One of my questions was going to be how confident are you in your ability to keep sourcing whiskey from the same supplier? But it sounds like you don't have an issue there.
No, because my strategy we started was let's become independent from a warehousing perspective. And that way we can expand and control our destiny and not be sitting in other distillery houses. So we can really have more control of the type of oak we use. We can kick off a lot of experimentation on the way we're aging and the proof we're aging. So there is much more to come in that sense. So, and I'm keeping, right now I have a very nice set of whiskeys that are way above 10 years. But I don't know yet what to do because I've been walking away. Even this release don't have age statement because sometimes you need younger age to compensate something that is very strong, like in this case. So here you have 13 years old as well, like 7 years old, and the water. So you need to combine the different ages. So I rather don't call it 7 years old. Like I'm kind of moving away from that. I feel like let me give you an example. It's much better a blend of 12 years old and 4 years old, 40% 12, 60% 4, than an average of the two ages that is 7 or 8. Like,
of course, you get more complexity that way. You're drawing from two different palettes of colors.
And sometimes the younger is going to keep you, the punch is going to allow you for structure. The older is going to give the long finish and really deliver like the magic on the back of the palette. And if you have an ingredient like this water, I call it magic water when I first tasted. It's like you want like that probably punch to be able to compensate a little bit. So the Chardonnay cask is there to rebalance, if not taste really too much, like and really helps to compensate and give sweetness, but also some structure.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I should mention that we haven't actually received our shipment of this yet, so I don't know the price. But I'm fairly sure it's about in line with the other releases, so I'm expecting it to come in somewhere around the 50-something mark, which, again...
like 59-ish, it's going to be around, like in the higher, like, close to 60. Yes.
Close to 60? That sounds about right. And I should mention to all of our Dram Association members that so long as this is being featured, it is 10% off for all members. So come in this month, grab yourself a bottle at a nice extra discount.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you very much for joining us on YouTube as well. And we'll see you on the next video. I'm not actually sure what the next video is, so you'll be as surprised as I am. Sláinte mhath.
Cheers.